Actually, guess since COVID started, I've probably attended like 5 virtual conferences now. Some obviously hosted as more of like a community type event like B-Sides, and some huge, multi-million-dollar corporation hosted and sponsored conferences. And I mean, I have to say, like, they all have technical problems, but this one has had by far the fewest technical issues out of almost any of the conferences that I've been on lately. I mean, even ones that are like, there's millions of dollars going into these, platforms and conferences and stuff like that. And I mean, there's been some technical hiccups that I've seen on B-Sides, but nothing like even remotely as bad as like some of the other ones. Hey, Mike, how's it going? So yeah, kudos to the B-Sides crew for and the Army of Volunteers for putting together this conference, because I think it's been really great so far. I've had a lot of fun. All right, so it's pretty much almost 1:05. I'm going to actually kick this off and get started now because I did a dry run a couple of days ago, and it went an hour and 20 minutes, which is way over my time. So I'm going to try. I cut a bunch of content out, but I'm going to try and kind of fly through this as much as I can, just so that I can kind of cover all of the talking points. So the agenda today of what I kind of want to talk about is, a very brief introduction about who I am and like what is SOAR, what does the SOAR landscape look like, some of the things that I've heard people say to me when they think that they're not ready for SOAR. And then I wanted to kind of dive a little bit deeper into the types of things that you might need to know if you want to get into using a SOAR platform, right? Like, how do I get data into it? And how do I break problems down to find out if they're a good fit for SOAR or not? And then I wanted to walk through step by step an example of how we might break a problem down and get it into a SOAR platform, and then where I think we're heading in the future. And I'm going to keep this as vendor agnostic as possible. I actually don't work for a SOAR vendor today. I have in the past. But I'm not going to be talking about any one specific technology. I'm going to be talking kind of about the entirety of the SOAR landscape today. So a little bit about who I am. I'm Nick McKerrall. I'm currently a field engineering manager at a company called Databricks, but I've kind of had a long and very varied IT career that's spanned over the past 20 years or so. I'm not going to get into those details or not, but I did want to pull up a picture of my favorite job title that I've had over the years. So at one point in my career, I worked for a very small software development company that got acquired by Lockheed Martin. And when Lockheed bought us, they said, hey, everybody, keep doing what you're doing. You're doing a great job, and we bought you to kind of keep plugging away at the technology that you're working on and the business that we acquired. But we don't want to keep any of your job titles, because Lockheed had a very structured job title matrix that they wanted everyone to fit into. So they said, don't worry about it. We're just going to change your job title. We'll send you all new business cards with your new job titles, and that's that. So a month goes by, and I get a box of business cards in the mail, and I open them up, and they're French. Well, they're English and French. And on the French side, the job title did not look anything like what I was expecting. And I don't speak French, but I Google translated it, and it roughly equated to Deputy Chief Analyst of Information Systems. And any French speakers on the chat, chime in if I translated that wrong. But it was the one and only time, I think, probably in my life and in my career, where I get to claim the title of Deputy Chief, which definitely was not my title while I was working at Lockheed, but according to my business cards, it was. So my favorite job title that I've had over my years is the Deputy Chief Analyst for Information Systems. Now, any good presentation should probably start with a quote. So I'm going to throw a quote at you here. No amount of money ever bought a second of time. And that quote could be attributed to Howard Stark. Does anyone in the chat know who I'm talking about when I say Howard Stark? I'll give you a hint. It's this guy. And if you're still not sure, I'll give you another hint. It's Iron Man's dad from the Avengers movies. So it was, there you go, Chad, you got it. The quote is great, right? As a father, I can really attribute or appreciate where it came from in terms of, the quote itself, because being a father and having to balance time between work and family, definitely it's true that no amount of money ever bought me back a second of time with my kids, which is the context in which that quote was made. However, I would put a little caveat around that, in that that quote is 100% true unless you're talking about that money being spent on a SOAR platform. And that's really going to be a kind of common theme that we're going to talk about today is SOAR tools, first and foremost, are going to focus on saving you time. And time's a commodity that is obviously in very short supply, especially in most SOCs that I've ever been a part of or witnessed. And in any IT organization, time is of such short supply. And there's very little or very few things that you can invest your money in that will actually give you time back. In fact, most security tools are going to be demanding of your time, right? If you acquire or purchase them, then time is essentially something that you're going to have to spend on configuring them, setting them up, monitoring them, and making sure that they're working properly. But hopefully, SOAR is the opposite of that. I mean, it's still going to take an investment of your time, but hopefully that time gets paid back in much greater dividends. So what is SOAR? Because, I've probably used the acronym at this point like a half dozen times in the presentation. We're already like 5 minutes in. Well, SOAR is Security Orchestration, Automation, and Response. That's what the acronym stands for. And it's a relatively new category of security tool that kind of really started gaining popularity around 2 or 3 years ago. I mean, good security folks, or probably like just good IT people in general, have been scripting away at everything that they possibly can for as long as IT's been a thing. So SOAR is kind of like both the newest and the oldest product in security, right? Because the minute we had computers, we started scripting as much as we can in terms of getting rid of useless or automating the things that are repetitive that we don't want to do. The fact of what SOAR provides beyond what we can currently do today is more so a framework and a structure that makes it so much easier to automate things. And we're going to talk a little bit about what that exactly means in a few slides from now. Gartner believes that to be a SOAR tool, you have to touch upon the 3 bullet points that I've got underneath the definition, which is a SOAR platform or a SOAR tool will provide threat and vulnerability management, security incident response capabilities, and security operations automation. Most SOAR tools are going to be providing the automation. Automation is actually kind of easy, right? Anyone that's written a script before should be familiar with automation. The orchestration part is much trickier. So orchestration really requires multiple products that don't generally work together to start working together as like a singular unit. And I mean, if they did work together, you probably wouldn't need SOAR. For example, like if your corporate firewall and your endpoint security product were able to talk to each other and communicate with each other and share and pass information between each other, then, maybe if that was the process that you were trying to automate, you wouldn't necessarily need SOAR. Or if you predominantly work in the cloud, then you can automate and you can script a lot of actions inside the cloud. However, if you've got multiple cloud platforms, doing that security in the cloud, in terms of like identifying where your threats and vulnerabilities might be and locking things down, it's very different between each cloud platform because you've got different APIs and you've got all sorts of like differences between how you actually interoperate or interact with those platforms. So, you might use SOAR to kind of tie all of those things together across different cloud vendors. So if you do end up investing in a SOAR platform, what is that actually going to get you? Like, what's it going to provide? Well, I mean, SOAR is kind of mostly a small evolution in security operations, again, because we've been scripting things for years already. But it's first and foremost, as I mentioned, a tool for recapturing time. And that time that you want to recapture is time spent on menial repetitive tasks that don't really require a lot of human logic or intellect. You're also going to be getting the capabilities to respond much quicker to incidents or issues. You're probably not fully remediating those issues, and we're going to talk a little bit about that in a bit. But just getting rid of a lot of the menial and repetitive tasks, making sure that those get taken care of much quicker. Another key and probably often overlooked benefit to what SOAR is going to provide is that capability to standardize how you respond to your events, right? So especially during like the investigation phase in an event, you probably have more than one security analyst that works at your organization today. They're going to all have varying different ranges of skill sets and knowledge, and a SOAR platform can really help them codify the steps that they need to take and standardizing how they respond to those incidents through kind of like a semi-structured workflow, right? One that will produce much more uniform outcomes as people take on or tackle different types of incidents inside the organization. So that standardization of how you respond is going to be a huge benefit to a lot of organizations by investing in SOAR, which maybe isn't something people think of, because when they think of SOAR, they think of these big wild playbooks that, end to end just kind of take care of processes. And that's definitely not that's not the first step. That's not where you want to get started when you're using SOAR. Another area where SOAR is going to be providing you a benefit is probably kind of bringing together this convergence of the SOC and the NOC, or the SOC and IT operations. I mean, plenty of SOC and NOC teams today work totally separately, but in my opinion, that's kind of like the heart and the lungs, not knowing that each other exists, right? Or not being able to interoperate with each other, right? You start exercising, your heart beats faster, but if your breathing doesn't increase, then you don't get the oxygen to your blood. And likewise, in any type of corporate IT environment, if security and IT are operating independent of each other, then there really isn't a lot of knowledge about what one is doing, what the other is doing, and whether or not they're kind of both contributing to the overall health of the organization. The SOC and the NOC are part of the company's body, right? They need it to live, so they should work together. And that's maybe a rant for a different B-sides, because we could go into a much greater detail about like the convergence of security and IT, or the security and network operations center. But we won't necessarily talk too much about that in the interest of time. And lastly, SOAR is going to provide you with a better way to focus on risk management. It's important to kind of differentiate between, I don't really think SOAR is going to help you mitigate risks per se, but it's going to be a good tool for helping you manage risks, because with some of the time-consuming tasks that, or the repetitive tasks that you're going to be using your SOAR platform to try and address, you're going to have much more time to be able to spend on kind of higher value activities. And, those might be activities like threat hunting or focusing on like risk-based alerting. So risk management is going to become a little bit easier with the SOAR platform, because you can kind of take on or tackle some more risk inside the organization that you need to be able to focus on. And some things that SOAR isn't going to be able to provide to you is your SOAR platform isn't like going to get rid of your SOC, right? You're not going to operate or automate, I should say, all of the operations inside your SOC. So is it going to get rid of your SOC? I'd say the answer is no. Is your SOAR platform, going to get rid of the need for a MSSP, or a managed security service provider? Well, the answer to that is kind of a maybe, right? Because it really depends on what your MSSP is providing to you today. I know a lot of people use MSSPs, especially in larger organizations, but what those MSSPs are providing really varies from company to company, right? And if automation of the services that MSSP provides is something that the SOAR platform can provide, well, then it's probably easier to replace them with the SOAR platform, and it's probably a lot cheaper as well too. But totally depends on the size, the scope, your security posture, what it is that you're trying to automate. I mean, it's not a one-size-fits-all answer. Is your SOAR platform going to eliminate the need for a SIM? Well, we're going to get into that a little bit later, but I think the answer to that kind of is maybe. What we're seeing in the industry today is there's like a convergence of SOAR and SIM. So a lot of SIM products are implementing SOAR technology and or buying SOAR companies and integrating them into their product line. So it's becoming quite a gray area what SIM and SOAR might be. And, if we follow the nomenclature of most, security tools, we'll start seeing next generation SIMs that include SOAR and stuff like that. We probably already have that today, but, it's just not quite there yet. It's getting there. However, if you don't have a SIM today, I wouldn't necessarily say that you need to have one to invest in a SOAR platform. And we're going to go much deeper into that in a little bit here. And lastly, your SOAR isn't really a staff augmentation platform. So is it going to reduce the need for you to hire more analysts? Well, again, that's kind of a maybe, right? You can't replace people with SOAR unless the tasks that you have those people doing are the equivalent of like, George Jetson pushing the button, right? You know, if you don't know what I'm talking about here, then that just means that I'm much, much older than you. But, you know, in the Jetsons, his job was to just push a button every single day. But, you know, if the people that you have working in your organization today are predominantly doing something that you could fully automate with SOAR, then you probably could replace them. But I would argue that you probably hired them not because they're really good at menial repetitive tasks. You could take the things that they're doing on a daily basis, automate that process and shift them into higher value activities, right? Or shift them into providing even more value back to the organization. Now, this is a bit of a gray area, right? Because we're going to start talking about things that like you can do with SOAR that gets you time back, and time back is equatable to like man hours, so to speak. And therefore, you know, could we eliminate the need to hire more analysts if we bought into a SOAR platform? Well, really, that's kind of very debatable and or personal to like the problems that you're seeing within your security operations center today. But I think it's better to think of it less as a staff augmentation tool and more so as a tool that gives people time back so that they can do higher value activities. Now, do you need a SIM to get value out of SOAR? We touched upon that already, but like digging a little bit deeper into that question, I said a SOAR platform doesn't need to replace a SIM, but you do need, let me kind of rephrase that. A SOAR platform doesn't replace a SIM, but do you need a SIM to get value out of SOAR? And I've heard from a lot of people that in their security roadmap, they kind of have a list of like a wish list of things that they want to acquire. SIM comes before SOAR in that particular instance. Well, I can tell you kind of definitively, SIM is not a prerequisite to SOAR. And for the folks that are on the call that are wondering what SIM is, because I guess I should have defined that acronym, that's Security Incident Event Management, right? Or Security Information Event Management. I've heard different acronyms, but Security Incident Event Management, essentially a way to standardize bringing all of the security alerts in your organization into a single place and then providing you with a platform so that you can start remediating and triaging those incidents. But again, like the industry's kind of conflating and combining these two terms rapidly, but depending on what your problems are today, you probably don't need a SIM to be able to get into SOAR. And I think that, you know, it can be a benefit, definitely. If you have a SIM today, you should be looking at SOAR. But really, like if you have an environment where you have some kind of centralized searchable log storage, you have a ticketing or a ticket event management system happening in your organization today, you can probably get into SOAR right away, especially the types of SOAR platforms that have API level connectivity to those different tools and products. Sometimes, you know, people don't need, I'm sorry, I'm reading the comments as they're flying by here. Thanks, Sean. Sometimes people don't ever need a SIM and kind of bypass that need for it. And I'm going to talk about like that archetype of a company in a few slides here. But what you essentially need to be able to use a SIM today, to be able to use a SOAR platform today is some sort of an ability to extract artifacts. And artifacts you can kind of think of as like the IOCs I've got listed in my pyramid of pain here, like hash values and IP addresses and domain names and stuff like that. And if you can get those artifacts out of your tooling that you have today, even if that tooling isn't a SIM, then you are probably ready for a SOAR platform. You know, you probably also don't need a SIM if really like the problems or the processes that you're trying to automate have really nothing to do with a SIM in and of itself, right? And we're going to talk about yeah, I did say pyramid of pain, TJ. And the link to that pyramid of pain is maybe hard to read, but it's at the bottom of that slide here. That's not my creation. That somebody else created the pyramid of pain. And the pyramid of pain, like when they talk about it, they talk about like things that are really easy, IOCs that are kind of easy to determine like the size and scope of versus things that are really, really tough. So if you attended like Kyle Housen's talk yesterday, where he was talking about like how he flags and tags, you know, different types of IOCs as they come into his environment, and then he tries to also tag, you know, TTPs or tools that that attackers might be using against him. You know, you have to have a fairly robust framework of logging and tagging capabilities sort of built up inside your organization to be able to even get to that stage. And then once you're at that stage, you can automate a lot of the responses or investigation stages of those processes with SOAR. So we're going to go into that. I mean, the really important thing there is that you need to have some kind of ability to have like a common event model inside your organization where you can normalize the content of that data that you're collecting, which is why maybe if you have centralized logging, you can do that. And there's lots of different formats out there, like common event format, and if you have a Splunk platform, the Splunk Common Information Model, that would allow you to be able to normalize data, which is going to make it so much easier for you to be able to build your SOAR playbooks. And so I talked a little bit about there's different security archetypes that I've encountered as I've worked with people over the years. And I've kind of broken them down into 3 different security archetypes. So these are different companies that I've kind of come into where they've said, we don't know if we're ready for SOAR or SIM or where we're going to go next. So can you help us? Can you give us some guidance here? And this is by no means all inclusive. There are more than 3 different security archetypes with companies. However, this is sort of just in general what I've witnessed. So the first archetype of company that I've kind of come across is a company that says, hey, we have a SIM, right? Okay, so we have a SIM and we have a problem with our SIM today. And this problem is almost universal for any organization that has a SIM. We have a ton of events or a ton of alerts. Those alerts are coming into the SIM, and that's great, but they're being tagged or qualified with a questionable level of urgency, right? So I don't know if my threat activity detected is critical or not critical. My SIM thinks it's critical, but I have to do an investigation to be able to determine whether that is or is not true, right? And the problem with this is that when you get a SIM, all of a sudden you've got all of these alerts that you actually have to do something about, right? So you have a steadily growing queue of unassigned work that you have to take on. So now it's time to investigate, like, well, what do we do about this? Well, either we have to tune our SIM and ignore a bunch of these alerts that are getting created, or we have to figure out a way to kind of automate or triage as many of these events as possible. And the best possible way you can do that is going to be from determining whether or not these are false positives or not, and whether or not the urgency or criticality of these events is truly been assigned to the proper level that it actually is to your organization. So you'll have this journey, right, where you want to then start going and investigating your different SOAR platforms that are out there today. And in a few slides, we're actually going to talk about like what that journey might actually look like. The next type of archetype of company that I've come across is the one that says, we don't have a SIM, but we think we have a pretty good idea of what's going on in our environment today, right? So you don't need a SIM to be good at security or to have a really strong security operations center. I mean, it's helpful, but it's not necessary. You can get through a bunch of different dashboards and a bunch of different tools, visibility into the different types of alerts that are happening in your environment today. And you're going to see, people like, hey, I check my endpoint logs and I check my firewall logs and I check the logs in my various different cloud platforms. And, maybe the team has gone out and, scripted a bunch of stuff in PowerShell to be able to scan the environment and look for vulnerabilities or, look for issues that they might need to tackle. Maybe they already have an MSSP, and that MSSP kind of handles a lot of the remediation of things that they ship off to them in terms of their logs, or they've got cloud dashboards for different systems and a ticketing system that allows them to see like what's being generated and what's going on. This type of company is still a good candidate for SOAR because maybe they do or don't have a playbook already for how to handle common incidents, but it wouldn't take much for you to sit down with that company or to just sit down as the team together and work out like 2 or 3 of either the most important or the lowest hanging fruit in terms of like incidents that frequently occur within the organization. And, I say this because if you're investigating getting a SOAR platform, then you're going to want to take to the vendor of choice or the vendors of choice that you're going going to be engaging with, this list of things that you want to be able to automate, right? Or if you're looking at implementing open source SOAR, you're going to want to either like pick the open source person or the person who's going to be like tasked with implementing this solution inside your environment. You want to sit down with them and say, hey, here are the first 2 or 3 things that we really want to automate inside our organization today. And you're going to want that vendor or that person to show you how they can integrate and handle your playbooks. You know, most importantly, does the SOAR platform that you're looking at actually integrate with your technology stack, right? If it doesn't have built-in integrations with the types of tools and technology that you already have in your environment today, then before looking at, well, how are we going to get it to integrate, look to other vendors first, right? Maybe I can purchase another SOAR tool that has better integration into the technology that we've already invested in, because the business isn't going to want to rip everything out and replace it with the tools that the SOAR platform best integrates into. If it doesn't have that integration, then how long will it take that company to create that integration for you, right? So when you're evaluating a SOAR platform, if you say, hey, we have this security tool and I want you to integrate with it, and it doesn't look like you do today, how long is it going to take you to turn around that integration for me and you know, build that functionality into it? So being able to like see how responsive that SOAR platform is going to identify whether or not you're going to be a good fit with them, right? Because if you look at what SOAR can provide to you over time, you know, a big component of that is that, you know, I'm not writing all these scripts manually because scripts are really brittle, right? And the smallest change into my environment, or maybe I update a tool and it changes the API, or it changes the way that the API responds back with the type of information that the SOAR platform needs to parse, I need that vendor to fix it for me, right? Otherwise, that work is on me. And now my task is constantly chasing all the integration points of my SOAR platform to make sure that they're working properly. And really, the platform should make that easy. And the company that you're buying the platform from should make that easy for you. So it's something to like keep in mind if you don't have a SIM, or just in general when you're purchasing a SOAR platform, is does this align with my technology stack? And does my technology stack provide the capabilities for automation in their APIs? Because I can't tell you how many times I've gone into a company and they've said, okay, you know, we have FireEye, we've got Palo Alto, we've got Cisco, we've got Checkpoint, we've got Fortinet, we've got this and this and this. I would like my SOAR platform to automatically quarantine my hosts whenever this particular activity takes place. It's like, great, what kind of host quarantining you know, software do you have? And they'd be like, oh, I've got this technology. And you look at it and it's like, does it have an API? Yeah, okay, great. What capabilities exist within that API? Well, the API doesn't allow you to quarantine hosts. Okay, well, we've got a problem here because it's going to be really difficult to build a playbook around something that we can't automate. So now we got to investigate, like, where can we go from there? So you have to ask those questions in advance and not just assume that every single software platform out there has a robust API that has all the functionality that you're looking for. I think new and modern companies take an API first approach because that's where the industry's heading, but really legacy companies don't. And I won't name any names because I'm sure that there are some vendor sponsors here today that wouldn't want me to, but there's some vendors that really need to get their act together in terms of getting their APIs up to snuff. Now, you know, having gone on that little tangent here, the third archetype that I want to talk about is the company that doesn't have a SIM and they also don't really know what's going on. So those types of organizations, it's a little bit tougher. You're not really ready for SOAR, right? They've got dashboards, but they don't look at those dashboards until a security incident happens or occurs. And then when that incident occurs, it's a scramble to do, you know, root cause analysis and figure out how they're going to remediate. And then they get it fixed, and then they rinse and repeat. And it just keeps happening over and over and over and over and over again. And then, you know, eventually their job really kind of just looks like constantly putting out fires and just moving the fires around as best they can to try and get, you know, some manageable level of sanity in their environment today. So they're not ready for SOAR, right? Like there's other things that they need to focus on, right? If your job as the security person is also like to wear 9 other hats inside the organization, you're security and you're also printer repair and you're also tell me why the internet is slow and you're also help me connect my home computer to the Wi-Fi network, then, you know, you might not have time to invest in the SOAR platform because there's so many other things that you need to focus your attention on. in this situation, you know, maybe instead of looking at SOAR platforms, you might want to consider looking at a new job. But I mean, either way, you have other issues that you need to deal with first. So we've kind of passed through the list of archetypal companies. Now, if they actually go out and buy a SOAR platform, well, what are you actually getting? Well, you're getting out-of-the-box connectors to third-party products. You're getting some sort of a UI to visually model your playbooks. You're getting some way to detect or debug when your playbooks break. You're getting some sort of incident response and incident management, and you're getting dashboards and you're getting reports, right? These are the essential things that you're buying when you buy into a SOAR platform. And who might you buy these things from? Well, there are many, many, many different vendors on the SOAR marketplace today, and the list is ever growing. Some of these are big names, right? You know, you'd recognize like the Palo Altos and the Splunks and the IBMs and ServiceNows of the world, and some you've maybe never heard of before. Which one is the best one for you? Well, really, it kind of comes down to which one is going to best integrate in your technology stack, provide a platform to perform the processes or actions that you're looking for it to perform, and price the platform in a way that's affordable to your organization. I wish there was like a one-size-fits-all where I could say, oh, just buy Splunk or just buy Demisto or just buy Resilient. But you know, the true answer to that is that you really have to kind of go out and test a lot of these different platforms, because everyone's situation is going to be somewhat unique. Now, maybe you don't like this idea of investing in a vendor technology and you want to go the open source route. Well, there are open source SOAR platforms today, and I'm not going to proclaim to be an expert in any of them, but in fact, actually, I'm only listing one true SOAR platform in my list here, which is Shuffle. So shuffler.io is the website for Shuffle, which is an open source SOAR platform. But really, to get Shuffle to work properly, you kind of have to wrap it around a lot of other tools, technologies, and capabilities, right? So if you are looking at Shuffle, then you're probably going to want to look at tools like Hive, and you're going to want to look at tools like MISP, and you're going to want to look at tools like, you know, hey, maybe I don't have a SIM, but I could use something like Alienware, which has been rebranded as the cybersecurity OS SIM product from AT&T. Or I am looking for just logging in general, right? And I want to stay in the open source space. Well, Elastic has capabilities around that. Now, really what you're looking at here is a lot of things that you have to manage yourself. And none of these tools are bad, right? None of these tools are things where it's like, I would not recommend you go down this road with any of them. But an open source project requires work, right? An open source project requires you to manage and maintain it, or pay someone to manage and maintain it for you. And stitching all these things together is not a one-time activity. You're going to have to continue to make sure that they all work together. And, you know, knowing how our industry works today, we're going to take all those tools and technologies. We're going to build a, you know, Rube Goldbergian type connection between all of them so that they work together. We're going to cram them into a bunch of containers inside of Kubernetes, and we're going to wrap that whole thing in the cloud. And you know, hopefully we've got enough people on staff to manage and maintain it. Now, I'm not trying to discourage you from looking at open source SOAR, but there's also a lot of community editions of paid platforms that are out there today. I know Demisto does it. I know Phantom does it, and I'm sure others do as well too, where you can get a lot of the features and functionality out of the SOAR platform without paying for it, just to start getting your feet wet in terms of automating things that you want to be able to automate. And then if you're starting to see value and you're starting to see, hey, I really like this tool or this platform, it's going to be a lot easier to be able to justify the cost around it. So I have my platform, be it a closed source or open source platform. You know, how do I actually get data in, and how do I feed this thing, right? So, well, you know, centralized logging solutions would be the most kind of obvious or easiest, right? If I have centralized logging, then I can run, you know, searches and reports and stuff like that, and I can get those to trigger events inside my SOAR platform. Or if I do have a SIM, right? Again, a SIM can generate an incident or an event, and that event can kick off a playbook inside a SOAR platform. So there's many different ways that those initial like steps can be kicked off. But what if I don't have central logging? What if I don't have a SIM? Or what if the trigger that I want to trigger my playbook isn't in either one of those tools? Well, ticketing systems, right, can kick off a SOAR playbook. You can use scripts. You can do them over APIs. You can have a inbox that you monitor, and every time an email shows up in the inbox, you perform some sort of an action. You can even kick playbooks off manually, and this is a really overlooked feature functionality in a SOAR platform, right? People think I want to automate everything, but really, if your SOAR platform includes the ability to triage events and incidents using some kind of a framework, NIST would be a good example of that. You can use a model like NIST to develop a framework of how you want your analysts to respond to incidents, and you can build a series of playbooks that they need to follow through for them to be able to check off that incident in terms of whether or not it is or is not going to be something that needs to be escalated or remediated, right? So running simple playbooks and scripts will eliminate the need for those people to take on those repetitive steps, and it will save your analysts the time of having to figure out, well, like, what do I do next? Where do I go? This is one of the big values that a SOAR platform provides that people don't really think of, right? Again, it's that codified way to triage an incident, and it doesn't have to be fully automated. I don't need to build an end-to-end platform. Kara, I see your question here about, can you please talk a bit about UBA? So UBA would be user behavioral analytics. And I can try, if we've got time at the end of the presentation, we can definitely talk a little bit about UBA for those that aren't aware. UBA would be using tools and technology like machine learning to analyze the behavior of a person on your network to build a baseline of what behavior that is normal or good looks like and what behavior that's abnormal or malicious might look like, and then to trigger events based off of that type of behavior. UBA is still one of those things that is very much black box when it comes to a lot of products that are out there on the market today. Hopefully we're getting better, and I definitely can talk a little bit more about that, but we'll try and save that to the end because I know that we're kind of really dragging on time here for the presentation. So yeah, I will try, Kara. So let's talk about breaking processes down to determine whether or not it's a good fit for SOAR or not. You're going to want to take the lazy sysadmin approach, right? So think of tasks or activities that you already do today or anticipate doing in the future, and whether or not those tasks are repetitive, right? Do you anticipate them doing multiple times? If you're ever going to do that task or process more than one time, hey, it might be a good fit for automation. And you don't want to try and build everything out end to end. You just want to spend time identifying tasks that you need to repeat over and over and over again for different incidents, and then build up the automation around those manual steps. I mean, if you think about it, like from a NOC side, people have been forever like just writing little scripts to fix things, build user accounts, triage systems that fail or break on occasion, that sort of thing. And that's been the norm, right? Of course, in a world where you try and script everything, that if that person ever leaves and they've created a whole bunch of scripts that perform a whole bunch of different actions, the person that inherits their job has no idea what any of those scripts does. So eventually they fail. And it's like, let's just rebuild the wheel again and start from scratch. If you have a SOAR platform or some sort of automation platform, then hopefully, even if a person who built up that script to begin with leaves, that the person who inherits it can walk in, look at what's happening inside the SOAR platform and use it to understand exactly what's going on there, right? The other thing is that, if you don't have all the data, right, then you're going to have a really tough time breaking that process down inside of a SOAR platform. And what I mean by that is, let's say that you're not logging this information that you would need to be able to have inside the environment today. And maybe a good example of that would be endpoint logs, right? If part of my incident response is to see whether or not a process is running on a host, but I don't log running processes on my hosts, then I'm going to have a really hard time automating that. But there are, again, paid or free tools and technologies that you can use that maybe bypass or sidestep that need for centralized logging. And OS query is a good one in that particular instance, right? Especially if you pair a tool like OS query with a tool like Sysmon or just even Sysmon itself and a way to query the endpoints directly. So maybe if that endpoint is online and available, I could script my SOAR platform to run a search and do a local search on the logs to be able to determine whether or not a process was running or a host connected to a particular IP or port or something along those lines. So you have to kind of think of, is the data available before I build up that SOAR process? And then the next thing is, how do you break those processes down to determine if they're a good fit for SOAR? Do you have a ticketing system? What kinds of tickets are being opened? How long does it take to investigate those tickets? And how long does it take to remediate them? What does a false positive look like? How do you validate that false positive? And if you didn't get any more false positives for that particular type of incident, how much time would that give you back? If the answer is a lot, then it's probably a good process to start breaking down just to a SOAR and starting just with one. So let's walk through a real quick example here. I get an alert for a user visiting a malicious website. Well, first of all, if I think through that incident in and of itself, there's a lot of problems there, right? So every time I get an alert for a user visiting a malicious website, I have to ask my question, is that alert correct, right? Some alerts are wrong. Is that alert being flagged for like a minor threat, like adware or tracking or cookies or something like that? And I really don't care. It's a low risk thing. I don't actually care about that alert. I probably just need to go tune whatever device generated the alert. Maybe I don't have time to do that. Sometimes the alert is for a minor threat, but it's in reality a much more serious threat, right? It's been miscategorized or incorrectly categorized, and I need to determine that in the course of an investigation. Sometimes the alert is for a higher critical threat, but it actually isn't a higher critical threat. It's a false positive, and sometimes it's a true positive. So if we corrected for all of those different conditions with a SOAR playbook, and we made sure that the threats that went to the analyst first and foremost were real threats that were actually worth investigating, how much time would that save? Would it be enough time to justify either the cost or time needed to start going down the road of investigating whether or not a SOAR platform is worthwhile or not, right? And next, when I do get a threat for or an alert for a malicious website, I need to go through a whole bunch of different steps. So, it might look different in your world, and I just picked a bunch of random technology, but I need to test this domain. What am I going to test it against? Well, I might check virus total, right? Or if I pay for threat intelligence services like iSight, I might use iSight to test it. Maybe if both of those come back as being non-malicious, but I'm still not quite sure, I want to sandbox that URL, and I want to see whether or not my sandbox thinks it's malicious. So I've got another technology in there. It doesn't have to be Checkpoint, could be Joe Sandbox, right? It doesn't really matter what your technology stack is. And then based on the outcome of all those different events, I need to decide, am I going to continue my investigation, or am I just going to say this is a false positive, right? Now, let's say going through all of those steps, which aren't overly difficult steps. I could train an intern to do that. But let's say going through all of those steps takes 5 minutes per domain. Or if I need to integrate the sandbox into that, maybe it takes more closer to like 10 minutes or 15 minutes. What if every time that happened, I didn't need to spend those 5 minutes or those 15 minutes, right? What if, looking back at all the previous investigations that I've done, that those alerts for malicious domains are only actually really malicious 1 out of the 10 times? Well, wouldn't it be great if I just got the alert for that one time instead of for all 10? So next you might say, okay, that's fine. I understand what you just described here, but my process is not that simple, right? I don't just look up a domain and make a decision there, right? I have a whole bunch of other steps that I need to take, but you have to remember, you don't want to create a playbook that is going to take you from end to end in terms of an investigation. You want to break it down into its smaller atomic parts. And then you want to think of like the use cases where those playbooks might be applicable in other incidents or in other types of scenarios, right? Think about reusable code. Think about these functions that you can repeat over and over and over again inside your security or operation, and think about what that event lifecycle looks like inside your SOC. And there's a really good talk by a guy named Rob Gresham, who originally worked for Phantom, which is one of the SOAR platforms at Splunk bought. And if you look for Hacking Your Soul, SOEL, Security Operation Event Lifecycle, the talk by Rob is actually really interesting. So I won't go into those details, but look that one up. But what if we took all of those steps that we just talked about and we whiteboarded them, right? I used Visio, but I mean, you could whiteboard this type of thing much, much easier. And we built up kind of like a process flow or a flow chart of all of the steps that we would need to take for that particular process, right? Of how do I investigate a malicious domain? And then what do I do whether or not the tool gives me a positive or a negative result based off of that malicious domain? Well, you write all of those steps down visually, and you've basically now built the precursor to your SOAR playbook, right? What did we just do here? Well, we documented the response process for a type of event in our organization. We broke those response actions down, and we started looking at the different phases within those response actions, and we started determining, well, what can we automate and what can't we automate? And we didn't go through the whole thing, right? I didn't talk about what do we do if the URL that the user visited is actually malicious or not, but we're going to get into that in a few seconds here. But we basically determined what are the logical steps that we would follow inside of a playbook. Without knowing the SOAR technology that we may be purchasing or acquiring, we just thought through it logically. And then we take a step back and we look at, well, what is our overall high-level event lifecycle, right? Alerts get generated, alerts get validated, alerts are scoped, and then we have to make some sort of change or monitor. And then somewhere in that lifecycle, either at the end or in between those different steps, we need to alert people within the organization. Maybe the person impacted by the event, or maybe someone whose responsibility it is to look after that event. Now, if we wanted to further break this down inside the actual SOAR platform itself, then we could take a really phased approach. And we have to step down and break it into its atomic parts. And the first thing is, okay, I have a SOAR platform and I have an alert. So how do I get that alert into the SOAR platform, right? Well, in this case, I mean, if my alert is coming from a ticketing system, I just need to make sure the SOAR platform, integrates with the ticketing system that I have. In this case, I kind of picked ServiceNow, right? And the next step is when these alerts come in, I want to tag them as something. So, I mean, I called my alert event, but we could really tag this alert as anything like, hey, this is going to be a malicious URL investigation. And then the next step is, so we can get those alerts into the SOAR platform, and still part of phase one, is we need to break that use case down. Now, this playbook should look very close to the flow chart that we built up on our whiteboarding session or our Visio. And essentially what we're doing there is we're bringing the event in. So we have some sort of a trigger for our playbook. And then we are performing those actions we talked about. We're sending that domain off to different services to be evaluated. And then we have decisions to be made, right? So we have filter blocks or if-then statements that get put into our playbook that basically say, if this, then that. If it is malicious, then do this action. If it's not malicious, then do that action. We then kind of send that URL off to the analyst and we say, hey, we determined it's bad. You need to do your investigation. Here are all the details that we collected around that particular URL. Here's how many services in VirusTotal thought it was bad or thought it was good. And then if it's not bad, we send it to the sandbox. And from there, if the sandbox has to engage the analyst because it says, yeah, this is definitely bad, we feed that back into that original step, and then we take the next stage, right? Maybe we just update a ticket, and then that information goes to the analyst. This is a very simple playbook, but if you think about all of the time that you could save in this type of a playbook, especially if these are the types of events that you needed to analyze on a fairly regular basis, then all of a sudden, you don't have to do this step every single time, and you can start ignoring the noise and just focusing on the badness that's happening inside your organization. And maybe your next step is a manual one, right? Maybe if you just take the output from what that ticket says and you go, okay, I got to scope the threat, phase 2. Then I go into my, search tool or my SIM or my whatever, and I start looking for all the hosts that could have been impacted by that threat. You can stop there, right? You can now start using your SOAR platform and make sure that this playbook is going to run on a regular basis and be, reliable and accurate and provide you with that information that you need. You don't need to take it to the next step right away. But when you are ready to take it to the next step, maybe every single time you get that alert now, you perform this action of searching for the scope of that threat inside your organization, then the next thing you do is you build that into your SOAR platform, right? I take that same Splunk search, which I didn't write a great Splunk search, but just as an example, and I feed that into the SOAR platform. So now I use the SOAR platform to perform the scoping for me. And again, I update the ticket with information about the scope of the problem. And I don't have to do that day one. Right? That is the most important thing. That could be day 30. That could be day 60. That could be day 180. Once I'm confident that the smaller atomic part of my SOAR platform or that my playbook is running regularly and accurately, then I start introducing additional steps into it. And, the next thing that you could do after that is the remediation phase, right? So you could take it to the next stage and you could do something like, hey, I want to quarantine hosts that have visited a malicious site that I know is malicious and that they've run and had the potential to exploit their system. So now I want to quarantine hosts. Well, I don't want my SOAR platform to quarantine hosts automatically. It's a terrible idea. As soon as it can disrupt the business, then it's going to go wrong at some point. And when it does go wrong, it's going to be highly visible and disruptive. So I plug an analyst into that step and I say, I'm going to do all of this investigation, and then I'm going to give those results to the analyst. They get to decide whether or not is or is not a next step that they want to follow, like quarantine the host. And if it is, then I'm going to use that integration with my NAC or my endpoint security platform to quarantine that host. And then, if I wanted to, and I know I'm kind of out of time here, if I wanted to kind of continue, then maybe I want to automate things like alerting the person, right? Or letting them know that, hey, I have to quarantine your host. And then just, again, saving steps around the communication with the individuals that are responsible to be part of this investigation is going to be like a key component, because you're constantly having to write these emails anyways. Maybe you already have the email template sitting in your draft folder. Feed it into the SOAR platform and have it do the work for you, especially if you know that this is the phase of that investigation that I'm always going to be following when I integrate that next step. I know I flew through that, and I knew that this was going to be a very time crunch type of presentation, but there are lots of different problems that you might use SOAR to address for, and they're up on the screen here. I'm not going to kind of read through all of them. These are the problems that you might want to try and use SOAR to address. The types of actions that you might want to use SOAR to address is going to be around like updating statuses and setting severity and performing all of these different types of like menial steps or processes, especially things like updating tickets. So kind of in conclusion a little bit, can anyone afford a SOAR platform? Well, it really comes down to a breakdown of the things that you can automate, and the more that you can automate, the better, the more productivity that you're really going to get, right? So that's essentially it. Now, I can maybe, unless somebody kicks me out of the session here, I can touch very briefly upon, maybe some of the questions, or, maybe one thing that probably will come up is, so you've been looking at all these different slides, and in the bottom left corner of every slide, it said Databricks. Is Databricks a SOAR platform? Well, no, it isn't. I'm not here to like sell you a SOAR platform. Databricks is a data analytics platform, and really it's, I guess, adjacent to SOAR, if I could put it that way. It's a great tool to use to start exposing some of the things that we need to be able to do inside our environment today that we really can't. And a lot of that comes back to every security plan or security product out there on the market today pretty much sells ML as like a black box. And ML is not magic. ML is math. You have data scientists working in your organization today that can tell you that ML is math, and ML should actually be useful to you, right? So if you want to start trusting ML, if you want to start trusting AI, then we need to lift the covers up behind that. And to do that, we need to use tools and technologies that actually just work. We don't need more tools. We don't need more black boxes to plug into our networks, but we need things that can start solving some of these big data or data challenging problems to us. Like if someone came to you today and said, hey, we generate 100 terabytes of security data per day. Can we analyze that and look for like human behavior and look for like malicious insider threats? The answer is probably no. Your tools and technology probably can't handle that type of thing today, or if they could, it'd be insanely expensive. So taking open source tools and technology, wrapping them up into a platform that can actually be used to address all these issues is essentially what Databricks is. Databricks is SIM SOAR adjacent, right? It's about using it as a big data analytics platform to accomplish a lot of the big data security tasks that we have today. That's, a conversation for another day. So thanks, everyone. I really appreciate you coming to my talk. My conclusions are listed here. I'm not going to reread all of my slides here. Break your problems down into smaller atomic processes. You're ready for SOAR. You maybe just didn't know it yet. Centralized logging is insanely valuable, but it's not a prerequisite. SIM is valuable, but it's not a prerequisite. Don't try and automate everything end to end. Just start trying to save your time and get your analysts their time back. Appreciate everyone sticking around even past the hour here or past the time here. So thank you so much. I'm going to hang out. I'll answer as many questions in chat if there are any, but that's it for me. So thank you, everyone. Looking through here, questions around, is it difficult to integrate? I mean, I'm not sure the context around that question, but yeah, I mean, it's a good thing to ask when you're evaluating those types of platforms is how hard or difficult is it going to be to integrate my technology stack, right? In an ideal world, there's like a service account, there's an API, you plug it into the SOAR platform, and there's a list of actions that they can take care of. That's under a perfect world. In a not so perfect world, you know, it might be a little bit of massaging the responses that you get back from those APIs so that you can take that data and actually do something with it, right? And that's going to be like extracting the artifacts that you need out of those different tools so that you can get them into the next step of your platform. Some SOAR platforms are going to make it easier for you and some aren't. And there's some actually really great open source, like Open API is a source where they're creating kind of like connectors for a lot of really common tools that are out there on the market today, so that you can kind of have a common language in which you can interact with lots of different APIs, because every API responds slightly differently. But yeah, that's a good point. It can be a real challenge to integrate certain types of technology into your SOAR platform. Yeah, we talked a little bit about UBA. UBA is like a huge topic, and I'm quite passionate about both the advantages and disadvantages of UBA. Yeah, Alien Vault, it's free. I mean, if you don't have money for a sim, you can give it a try. I don't know, maybe some folks have had better experience with it than I have. I mean, for a free tool, it's amazing. It's great. It's changed hands a few times, but it's still out there kicking around. All right, I don't see any questions in the chat, so I'm going to close this off. Appreciate everybody coming. Thank you.